What's up, everyone? Bob's Blu-rays here, and today I'll be participating in the Rad Pack's Rad 9 Challenge. Now, these are 9 movies that made us, so stay tuned, and I'll get right into my list right after this. Alrighty, so I'm going to try to go in order. For me, it's going to be a little bit different than everybody else has done it, I suppose. For me, movies continue to shape and mold and make me to this day, even into my 30s. So I'm going to talk about the first experience I remember having with the movie all the way up until maybe I was in my 20s. So I'm not just going to pick 9 movies that I've rewatched as a kid or because they have nostalgic value to me. I'm going to pick 9 movies that have molded and shaped who I am to this day and my memories of those movies. So that's how I'm going to do it. So hopefully you enjoy, but let's go ahead and get started with the very first one. I always talk about Anaconda being the very first movie I remember seeing in theaters. This is actually the first movie I remember now seeing in theaters. Lion King I might have seen in theaters. I think I did, but I was probably only 3 or 4 at the time or something like that. But Toy Story I do remember seeing in theaters now. I just started thinking about it today when I was putting this list together. So Toy Story is going to be my first movie because it was my first movie I saw in theaters that I could remember, that I actually remember and enjoyed. And we saw it as a family. I remember my dad taking us, my sisters, and things like that. So it's the only reason that I would be into animated movies or even Disney to this day at all, because of Toy Story, probably. Because I'm really not into animated movies. This and Kung Fu Panda are really the only animated movies that I've watched for the most part. It's not my cup of tea. I do watch them, but those are really the only ones that I remember enjoying or check out for the most part. The next one is going to be the first, I'd say, adult movie that I saw in theaters, which would be Anaconda. And I always talk about this one, but it's such a great memory I had. I remember my dad taking me to see this. I believe I was 5 years old at the time, and I just loved it. I loved every second of it. I had a blast with it. It came out in April of '97, if I remember correctly, and I was 5 years old at that time. So, because I hadn't turned 6 that year yet. So this was such a great memory, so cool to see. I remember it so well. I remember it so vividly, seeing it in theaters with my dad, having an absolute blast. This is the moment I would say I fell in love with movies. Anaconda is the reason I love movies, and I loved watching movies with my dad. So that was the first experience I remember seeing of an actual adult movie in theaters, something that's not for kids. I've got to go Jaws. Now, I don't think I've ever seen this in theaters, but Jaws, I remember my dad showing me this movie and on VHS, and it was just it's so nostalgic to me. It scared me to death as a kid. It was so cool to watch. It's the reason I fell in love with shark movies. It's the reason I love creature features. It's got to be my favorite shark movie of all time, possibly favorite creature feature of all time. But I love this movie. I loved Jaws. It holds a special place in my heart because I remember watching it on VHS, kind of on repeat almost. My dad showing it to me and just loving this movie, both of us loving it, and just awesome. I'll never forget that part with the little kid on the tube in the raft, and it was just incredible. Like, it's just so iconic. Next one is going to be the first rated R movie that I saw in theaters, which will be Blade. So I have to pull this out because this is, like I said, the first R-rated movie I saw in theaters. Back in the day, you had to be 7 years old, at least 7 years old, and accompanied by an adult 21 years old or older to go see a rated R movie. And I got to see this. I remember, I think it came out in July or August, but I saw it in August. I think it came out in August, but it came out in August of '98. So my birthday had just passed, and my dad took me to go see this because I had turned 7 years old, and I loved it. I loved every second of it as well. Does it still hold up the same? Maybe not quite the same, but I still enjoyed it. But it holds such a special place in my heart as well because it's the first movie that I saw that was rated R in theaters. And my dad and I just loved it. I loved going to the theater with my dad. The next one I'll pull out is going to be Scream, of course. I love Scream. It's my favorite horror movie of all time, easily by far. It's the reason why slashers are my favorite subgenre of horror. I love the slipcover. I love everything about this movie. Absolutely everything about this movie. I adore it. I recently did a trivia for Movies and Sue with this movie, and it made me want to rewatch it. I've seen it so many times I could quote this movie to death. I remember watching this when I was probably about 7 years old, and the very beginning of this movie scared me to death. I was terrified. Oh my goodness. This was still, to this day, I would say at the time I watched it, was the scariest movie I had ever seen at 7 years old. It scared the daylights out of me. And it's the reason I fell in love with horror. Everything about this movie I loved. I adored it. I believe it's the first horror movie I saw, so that might have a lot to do with it. But it's still an excellent movie. It's a masterpiece. It's one of the greatest horror movies of all time. It's the reason I fell in love with Wes Craven. I'm so grateful to my dad for this one. And I recently took him to see Scream 5 in theaters. I don't think he's seen Scream 6 yet, so I'll have to show him that one. But the first Scream movie I saw in theaters was Scream 3. And then I got to see this one at the 25th anniversary at my theater. And it was really cool to see that. So that's a big reason why I love horror. And then this is another reason why I love horror movies. This scared the daylights out of me as well at 7 years old. Scared the bejeebus out of me. It's so iconic as well. It's an excellent movie. I would say this is, borderline a masterpiece of a horror movie as well. Everybody talks a lot about Halloween and other horror movies, but this came well before that. This was 1974, and I believe I saw this right around the same time I saw Halloween. But I remember a VHS called Boogeyman, and Boogeymen, I believe it was called. But they showed a bunch of clips of all these different horror movies. I Know What You Did Last Summer was on there, Phantasm, all these different horror movies. And that is a huge reason why I love horror movies and I got into them so much. Child's Play and so on and so forth. I could pull a number of horror movies in place of this, but I went with this one, and you just can't go wrong with it. Is it my favorite horror movie of all time? Of course not. I don't know if I would even put this in like top 25 maybe, but I do love this movie. I think it's very gritty, and it scared me so much as a kid. So that is another one I had to pull out. Then I'm going to go with this DVD with this tube sock of American Pie here. I love American Pie. I remember the first American Pie I saw in theaters was American Wedding, and I was about 12 years old, and it was in Michigan. I remember it very well. My mom was not very approving of me seeing that. I saw it with a friend of mine, and then we sat separate from my dad and my mom. But my dad always kind of went behind my mom's back at the time and showed me movies like American Pie and Porky's and some horror movies that I probably shouldn't have been watching as well. I think I saw American Pie before American Wedding. I'm not entirely sure. I believe I did. I believe I saw American Pie and American Pie 2, and it's why I wanted to go see American Wedding so badly. And so I was probably about 11. I would say 10, 11, or 12 years old when I saw American Pie for the first time. And we still talk about it to this day, my dad and I. I could quote this movie all day, every day. I could watch it all day, every day. It never gets old to me. It's much like Scream, where it's got easy rewatch value. And I just love this movie. I adore it. It's so funny. It's iconic. My dad's a lot like Jim's dad in a way. Always kind of was supportive and kind of just looked out for me. And yeah, I love this movie. Everybody always talked about how my dad was a lot like Jim's dad. But yeah, love this movie. Absolutely just iconic. Holds such a special place in my heart as well. Now, the next two I'm going to pull are movies that I didn't watch necessarily as a kid or on repeat. This is something I've only seen twice, but it shaped and changed the way I watched movies. So I took a film class in high school, And I'm going to pull out The Graduate here. This was my teacher's favorite movie of all time. When we watched this, I could have pulled a number of movies, Psycho, Rebel Without a Cause. We watched a bunch of Cool Hand Luke, great movies in film class. But it changed the way I watched movies. And that's why I'm pulling this as the Rad 9, because it shaped me. It changed me. And I never watched movies the same way again. It changed the way I watched them. Like, I still loved movies the same I did as a kid, but you grow up and you change and you start to learn camera angles. Like, I didn't learn a lot about CGI in high school in that class, but we learned all about camera angles. Why medium shot and low angle, high angle, things like that, pan shot. And I fell in love with it. Tracking shots, one take, single takes, things like that. And this movie's iconic, and it's super important. There's certain shots like this one where it's like in between, under her leg, and then the ending of this movie. And we broke it down in such detail, and I had to like write a paper on it. And this was probably one of my favorites from film class. Maybe my favorite. Psycho would be up there. But this is something that I rewatched a couple of years ago, and it still held up. So iconic, such a good soundtrack. So I'm pulling out The Graduate because it changed the way I watched movies. I was never the same after film class, and I loved it. Every second of that class. Adored it. And I took a class in college as well. But the very last one, my 9th pick I'm going to pull out, is going to be a movie that I took my dad to go see for his bachelor party, basically. So my dad is not a drinker. He quit drinking about 40 years ago now. And he didn't want to do anything crazy. He asked me to be his best man for his second marriage. And I was so honored, and I obviously accepted. And I believe I was 20 years old. And so I took him like mini golfing, but we both wanted to see this movie. And so I took him to go see Warrior. And we loved it. We walked out of the theater saying it was one of our favorite movies of all time. I would say it's probably in both of our top 10 favorite movies of all time. It holds a special place in my heart because of that moment, because I'll never forget that, hanging out with my dad, spending a day with him, even into my 20s, and being his best man, and doing that for his bachelor party because he wanted something simple like that. And we both loved movies, and so it was an incredible experience. And this was easily in our top 10. And it's an inspiring movie. It makes me want to be a better person. If I'm running a race or I'm doing something where I need inspiration, I'll oftentimes go to this movie. And it's so emotional. I don't have any brothers, but I can imagine the impact and the emotion that this movie packs for somebody who has a brother. But this is easily my 9th pull there. Like I said, these are all movies that have just shaped and molded me and made me, whether it's because it's the first movie I saw in theaters, it's only reason why I would like kids' movies, or because it scared the bejeebus out of me, or because I love horror movies. It's many different reasons here, but raunchy comedies, things like that. So it's a very diverse and different kind of stack here, but there is all 9 movies that have molded and shaped me over the years. Like I said, I wanted to pull some stuff into my later years here, but hopefully you enjoyed it. I would love to hear what your Rad 9 are. I still have a lot of videos to catch up on and watch. I know that a lot of people have made videos, such as Tim, I know Johnny has, and many, many others. Adam, the movie hunter, has made a video, but go check them out. There's a lot of others that have made videos. I can't name them all off the top of my head right now. Nick of Movie AV Impulse, he's also made a video. But go check out all their videos. Like I said, please sound off in the comment section letting me know what you think of my Rad 9 here. And let me know if you made a video and what yours would be if you haven't made a video. But thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you got to know me a different way because of this Rad 9. Thank you, Rad Pack, for this challenge. Mel, Justin, and Garrett, I really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun to do. It made me think, and it was a lot of fun. So thank you. Be sure to hit that like button if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe for all future content, and I'll see everyone on the next one. Have a great day.